Wattles' law of equipment. Failure. A component's degree of reliability is directly proportional to its ease of accessibility. That is, the harder it is to get to, the more often it breaks down. Wade's advice: never put off until tomorrow that which you could have forgotten about entirely. Wade's explanation: once you've found it, you quit looking. Waffles' law. A professor's enthusiasm for teaching the introductory course varies inversely with the likelihood of his having to do it. Wagner's law of sports coverage. When the camera focuses on a male athlete, he will spit, pick, or scratch. Wayne's conclusion: the only people making money these days are the ones who sell computer paper. Waldo's observation: one man's red tape is another man's system. Walensky's first law of political campaigns. If there are 12 clowns in a ring, you can jump in the middle and start reciting Shakespeare, but to the audience, you'll just be the 13th clown. Walensky's law. The intelligence of any discussion diminishes with the square of the number of participants. Walker's law. Associate with well-mannered persons, and your manners will improve. Run with decent folk, and your own decent instincts will be strengthened. Keep the company of bums, and you will become a bum. Hang around with rich people, and you will end by picking up the check and dying broke. Walker's law of the household. There is always more dirty laundry than clean laundry. Wallace's observation. Everything is in a state of utter dishevelment. Walson's law. If you put information and intelligence first at all times, then the money will come. Walters's law of management. If you're already in a hole, there's no use to continue digging. Walton's law of politics. A fool and his money are soon elected. Warren's rule. To spot the expert, pick the one who predicts the job will take the longest and cost the most. Washington's law. Space expands to house the people to perform the work that Congress creates. Washleski's law. Anything is easier to take apart than to put together. Watergate principle. Government corruption is always reported in the past tense. Watson's law. The reliability of machinery is inversely proportional to the number and significance of any persons watching it. Weber-Fechner. Law. The least change in stimulus necessary to produce a perceptible change in response is proportional to the stimulus already existing. Weber's definition. An expert is one who knows more and more about less and less until he knows absolutely everything about nothing. Wheeler's law. Nothing is impossible for the man who doesn't have to do it himself. Weinberg's corollary. An expert is a person who avoids the small errors while sweeping on to the grand fallacy. Weinberg's first law. Progress is made on alternate Fridays. Weinberg's law. If builders built buildings the way programmers wrote programs, then the first woodpecker that came along would destroy civilization. Corollary. An expert is a person who avoids the small errors while sweeping on to the grand fallacy. Weinberg's second law. If builders built buildings the way programmers write programs, then the first woodpecker that came along would destroy civilization. Weismann's law of examinations. If you're confident after you've just finished an exam, it's because you don't know enough to know better. Wellington's law of command. The cream rises to the top. So does the scum. Wells's law. A parade should have bands or horses, not both. Wellwood's axiom. Disorder expands proportionately to the tolerance for it. Westheimer's rule. To estimate the time it takes to do a task. Estimate the time you think it should take, multiply by 2, and change the unit of measure to the next highest unit. Thus, we allocate 2 days for a 1-hour task. Wethern's law of suspended judgment. Assumption is the mother of all screw-ups. Whispered rule. People will believe anything if you whisper it. Whistler's law. You never know who's right, but you always know who's in charge. White flag principle. A military disaster may produce a better post-war situation than victory. White's Chappaquiddick theorem. The sooner and in more detail you announce bad news, the better. Whole picture principle. Research scientists are so wrapped up in their own narrow endeavors that they cannot possibly see the whole picture of anything, including their own research. Corollary. The director of research should know as little as possible about the specific subject of research he is administering. Wicker's Law. Government expands to absorb revenue, and then some. Wilcox's Law. A pat on the back is only a few centimeters from a kick in the pants. Williams and Holland's Law. If enough data is collected, anything may be proven by statistical methods. Willoughby's Law. When you try to prove to someone that a machine won't work, it will. Will's Rule of Informed Citizenship. If you want to understand your government, don't begin by reading the Constitution. It conveys precious little of the flavor of today's statecraft. Instead, read selected portions of the Washington Telephone Directory containing listings for all the organizations with titles beginning with the word national. Wilson's Law of Demographics. The public is not made up of people who get their names in the newspapers. Winfield's Dictum of Direction. Giving. The possibility of getting lost is directly proportional to the number of times the direction giver says, "You can't miss it." Wingo's Axiom. All finagle laws may be bypassed by learning the simple art of doing without thinking. Wise fans lament. Fools rush in and get the best seats. Witten's Law. Whenever you cut your fingernails, you will find a need for them an hour later. Witzling's Law of Progeny. Performance. Any child who chatters nonstop at home will adamantly refuse to utter a word when requested to demonstrate for an audience. Wober's Essenide Rule. Satisfied needs incite demand excesses. Ideal goals grow faster than the means of attaining new goals allow. Wolff's Law. An optimistic view of a pessimistic world. It isn't that things will necessarily go wrong, Murphy's Law, but rather that they will take so much more time and effort than you think if they are not to go wrong. Wolff's Law of Decision-Making. Major actions are rarely decided by more than 4 people. If you think a larger meeting you're attending is really hammering out a decision, you're probably wrong. Either the decision was agreed to by a smaller group before the meeting began, or the outcome of the larger meeting will be modified later when 3 or 4 people get together. Wolff's Law of History Lessons. Those who don't study the past will repeat its errors. Those who do study it will find other ways to err. Wolff's Law of Management. The tasks to do immediately are the minor ones. Otherwise, you'll forget them. The major ones are often better to defer. They usually need more time for reflection. Besides, if you forget them, they'll remind you. Wolff's Law of Meetings. The only important result of a meeting is agreement about next steps. Wolff's Law of Planning. A good place to start from is where you are. Wolff's Law of Tactics. If you can't beat them, have them join you. Voltaire's Law. If you have the time, you won't have the money. If you have the money, you won't have the time. Woltman's Law. Never program and drink beer at the same time. Woman's Equation. Whatever women do, they must do twice as well as men to be thought half as good. Luckily, this is not difficult. Wood's Axiom. As soon as a still-to-be-finished computer task becomes a life-or-death situation, the power fails. Wood's Law. The more unworkable the urban plan, the greater the probability of implementation. Woodside's Grocery Principle. The bag that breaks is the one with the eggs. Woods's Refutation of the First Law of Sociogenetics. On the contrary, if you never procreate, neither will your kids. Woodward's Law. A theory is better than an explanation. Worker's Dilemma. 1. No matter how much you do, you'll never do enough. 2. What you don't do is always more important than what you do do. Working Cook's Laws. 1. If you're wondering if you took the meat out to thaw, you didn't. 2. If you're wondering if you left the coffee pot plugged in, you did. Wright's first law of quality. Quality is inversely proportional to the time left for the completion of the project. Winn's law. Negative slack tends to increase. Wyszkowski's first law. No experiment is reproducible. Wyszkowski's second law. Anything can be made to work if you fiddle with it long enough. Wyszkowski's theorem. Regardless of the units used by either the supplier or the customer, the manufacturer shall use his own arbitrary units convertible to those of either the supplier or the customer only by means of weird and unnatural conversion factors.